The war veteran was just seconds away from being attacked by an armed man inside the hospital where she saved lives every day. What happened when she faced this racist changed everything. You're about to discover how a black nurse who served her country with honor used her courage and training to turn a terrifying moment into something nobody expected. This Army veteran showed everyone in that hospital what true strength really means, and the ending will leave you speechless. Sarah Mitchell had seen combat zones overseas, but nothing prepared her for what she would face on a regular Tuesday morning at Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. This black nurse and Army veteran was about to encounter a situation that would test every ounce of her military training and her faith in humanity. The black nurse walked through the emergency room doors at 6 in the morning, ready for another shift saving lives, but an armed racist was already inside waiting, and what happened next shocked the entire hospital staff. Sarah spent 8 years in the Army before becoming a nurse. She served 2 tours overseas, earned multiple commendations, and learned how to stay calm under pressure that would break most people. The Army veteran came home determined to continue serving, just in a different way. She went to nursing school, graduated top of her class, and started working at Memorial Hospital 3 years ago. Every single day, this black nurse treated patients with compassion and skill that earned respect from doctors and families alike. But on this particular morning, all her training would be put to the ultimate test when she encountered an armed racist inside the hospital. The emergency room was already busy when Sarah arrived. Patients filled the waiting area, nurses rushed between rooms, and doctors shouted orders across the floor. The black nurse checked in at the nurses' station, grabbed her assignment sheet, and headed to examine her first patient. She had no idea that an armed man had entered the hospital 20 minutes earlier, carrying hatred in his heart and a weapon in his jacket. This racist had been watching the hospital staff, specifically targeting healthcare workers, and he had already decided that this black nurse would be his victim. The Army veteran was completely unaware of the danger approaching her. Sarah entered examination room 4 to check on an elderly patient recovering from a heart procedure. She smiled warmly, checked vital signs, and adjusted medication levels with the precision that made her such an exceptional nurse. The black nurse spent 15 minutes with this patient, making sure everything was stable before moving to the next room. As she stepped into the hallway, she noticed a white man in his 40s standing near the nurse's station, staring directly at her with eyes full of anger. The armed racist started walking toward her, and something about his aggressive posture immediately triggered the Army veteran's combat awareness. Sarah's military instincts kicked in instantly. The man approached within 10 feet, his hand moving toward his jacket pocket. The black nurse recognized the movement immediately from her Army training. Someone was about to pull a weapon. In that split second, Sarah had to make a choice. She could run, she could scream, or she could use her military experience to control the situation before it exploded into violence. The armed racist pulled out a handgun, pointing it directly at this black nurse while shouting slurs that made everyone in the hallway freeze in horror. But this Army veteran didn't freeze. Sarah's training took over completely. Instead of panicking, the black nurse raised her hands slowly, keeping her eyes locked on the armed racist while her mind calculated every possible move. She spoke in a calm, steady voice that came from years of military discipline. Sarah told the man she wasn't his enemy, that she was there to help people, and that whatever anger he carried didn't need to end in tragedy. The Army veteran kept talking, using psychological techniques she learned in combat situations to de-escalate threats. The armed man wavered, his gun shaking slightly, clearly not expecting this response from the black nurse he intended to terrorize. Security had been alerted, but they were still 2 minutes away. Those 2 minutes felt like hours as Sarah continued speaking to this armed racist, slowly building a connection that might save lives. The black nurse noticed his hand trembling, saw sweat forming on his forehead, and recognized signs of someone in crisis rather than someone committed to violence. Her Army veteran instincts told her this man could still be reached. She asked him his name. She asked if he had family. She told him about her own service to this country, how she fought overseas to protect everyone's freedom, including his. The armed racist started crying. What happened next shocked everyone watching from behind corners and doorways. The man lowered his weapon. The black nurse took one step closer, then another, her hands still raised, her voice still calm and reassuring. She told him that God had a different plan for this day, that he could choose a different path right now, that it wasn't too late to put the gun down and get the help he needed. The Army veteran extended her hand slowly, and the armed racist looked at it like he was seeing compassion for the first time in years. Tears streamed down his face as he placed the gun in Sarah's hand. The black nurse immediately secured the weapon and signaled for security to approach. They rushed in and restrained the man, but Sarah did something that surprised everyone even more. The Army veteran knelt beside him while security held him and said she would pray for him, that God could heal whatever pain made him come to that hospital with a gun and hatred. The armed racist sobbed uncontrollably, apologizing over and over, saying he didn't know what he was thinking, that he had lost his job, his family, and let bitterness consume him until he couldn't see clearly anymore. This black nurse showed him mercy when he deserved none. Police arrived within minutes and took the man into custody. Detectives interviewed Sarah for over an hour, amazed at how this black nurse and Army veteran had prevented what could have been a massacre inside that hospital. The armed racist confessed everything. He admitted he came there planning to hurt people, specifically targeting black healthcare workers because of racist beliefs he had harbored for years. But meeting Sarah changed something inside him. The way this black nurse treated him with dignity, even while he threatened her life, broke through walls of hatred he had built over decades. The story spread through the hospital like wildfire. Doctors, nurses, patients, and staff came to Sarah throughout the day, thanking her, calling her a hero, asking how she stayed so calm facing an armed racist. The black nurse humbly explained that her army training taught her to assess threats and respond strategically rather than emotionally. She said her faith in God gave her the strength to see that man as a human being in crisis rather than just a threat to eliminate. The Army veteran refused to accept the title of hero, insisting she just did what needed to be done to protect her patients and co-workers. But the hospital administration saw it differently. They called an emergency meeting with Sarah that afternoon. The black nurse walked into the conference room, expecting a debriefing about the incident. Instead, she found the hospital director, the chief of medicine, the head of security, and several board members waiting for her. The Army veteran sat down, still shaken from the morning's events, wondering if somehow she was in trouble for the way she handled the armed racist. What they told her next left her speechless. The hospital director stood and announced that Sarah's actions that morning saved countless lives. The armed man had been carrying enough ammunition to kill dozens of people. He had a detailed plan to cause maximum casualties in the emergency room during the busiest shift change. If this black nurse hadn't used her Army veteran skills to talk him down, the hospital would have experienced the worst mass shooting in its 100-year history. They had reviewed security footage and were astounded by her courage, composure, and compassion under pressure. The armed racist had been completely disarmed, both literally and emotionally, by the very person he came to hurt. The board announced they were creating a new position, Director of Emergency Response and Crisis Management. They offered it to Sarah immediately. The black nurse would train all hospital staff in de-escalation techniques, develop security protocols based on her military experience, and serve as a consultant for hospitals across the entire network. The Army veteran was overwhelmed. She had come to work that morning expecting a normal shift, faced down an armed racist, and now was being promoted to a leadership position that would impact patient safety across multiple states. She accepted with tears in her eyes. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, Sarah received a letter. It came from the county jail, written by the armed racist who had pointed a gun at her in that hospital hallway. The black nurse almost threw it away without reading it, but something made her open the envelope. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter that would change her perspective on everything that happened. The Army veteran sat down and read words that shocked her to her core. The man wrote that meeting Sarah saved his life in more ways than one. He explained that he had been planning to force police to kill him after shooting people in the hospital. It was meant to be his final act of violence and self-destruction. But when this black nurse treated him with humanity instead of fear, when she spoke about God's plan and second chances, something broke inside him. The armed racist said he saw his own daughter in Sarah's eyes, a daughter he hadn't spoken to in 5 years, because of the hatred that consumed him. The Army veteran's compassion made him realize how far he had fallen from the man he once was. The letter continued with details that made Sarah cry. The man had started attending the jail's religious services. He was working with counselors to address his racism and anger. He had written apology letters to every black staff member at the hospital, taking full responsibility for his actions and the terror he caused. The armed racist explained that this black nurse showed him what real strength looked like, what true service meant, and how faith in God could transform even the darkest heart. He said he would spend the rest of his life trying to become the kind of person who deserved the mercy the Army veteran showed him that day. Sarah wrote back. The black nurse told him about forgiveness, about how God gives everyone opportunities to change, and how she believed he could still make his life count for something good. She explained that her time in the Army taught her that people aren't defined by their worst moments, but by what they choose to do after those moments. The correspondence between this black nurse and the former armed racist continued for months, and slowly, a genuine transformation took place. The man pleaded guilty to all charges. He faced 20 years in prison for bringing a weapon into a hospital and threatening staff. But during his sentencing hearing, something unprecedented happened. The judge asked if anyone wanted to speak on behalf of the defendant. Sarah stood up. The black nurse walked to the front of the courtroom, looked at the man who had threatened to kill her, and told the judge about the letters, the genuine remorse, and the real change she had witnessed. The Army veteran asked for mercy, not because he deserved it, but because God's grace works that way. She said this armed racist had become a different person, and while he needed to face consequences, he also deserved a chance at redemption. The courtroom was silent. The judge, a black woman herself, looked at Sarah with profound respect. She sentenced the man to 12 years with the possibility of parole after 8 if he continued his rehabilitation work. She also ordered him to speak at schools and community centers about how racism and hatred nearly destroyed his life, using his story to prevent others from going down the same path. The former armed racist thanked Sarah through tears, promising to honor her mercy by becoming a force for good. The local news picked up the story. Soon, national media wanted to interview this black nurse and Army veteran, who had not only stopped a potential mass shooting, but had shown such extraordinary compassion to someone who came to harm her. Sarah appeared on morning shows, news programs, and podcasts, always redirecting attention away from herself and toward the message of forgiveness and second chances. The black nurse became a spokesperson for violence prevention, military veteran transition programs, and racial reconciliation efforts across the country. Memorial Hospital became a model for crisis response training. Sarah's program was implemented in over 200 hospitals nationwide within a year. The black nurse trained thousands of healthcare workers in de-escalation techniques that combined her Army veteran experience with psychological principles and faith-based approaches to conflict resolution. The armed racist incident that could have ended in tragedy instead sparked a movement that made hospitals safer for everyone. 3 years passed. Sarah received a call from the prison chaplain. The man she had shown mercy to was up for early parole, and they wanted her to be part of the hearing. The black nurse took a day off from her director position and drove 3 hours to the state prison. She sat in a small room with parole board members, corrections officers, and the man whose life intersected with hers in that hospital hallway. The Army veteran listened as he spoke about his transformation, his deep regret, and his plans to dedicate his life to fighting racism and violence if given the chance at freedom. The parole board granted his release with strict conditions. He would live in a halfway house, attend counseling, work with at-risk youth, and speak publicly about his journey from hatred to redemption. The former armed racist looked at Sarah and asked if she would be willing to appear with him at some of these speaking engagements. The black nurse agreed, seeing an opportunity to show the world that change is possible, that God can work through even the worst situations, and that choosing compassion over revenge creates ripples that extend far beyond one moment in time. They spoke together at schools, churches, community centers, and conferences. The black nurse and Army veteran would tell her side of the story, explaining how her military training and faith gave her the tools to see a human being instead of just a threat. Then the former armed racist would share his perspective, describing how hatred had poisoned his life until one woman showed him a different way. Their partnership became powerful testimony to the possibility of redemption and reconciliation. Sarah's impact continued growing. The black nurse wrote a book about her experiences, from serving in the army to facing down an armed racist in her hospital to building a friendship with the man who once wanted to kill her. The Army veteran donated all proceeds to programs supporting military veterans transitioning to civilian life and organizations working to end racism and gun violence. Her story inspired countless people to reconsider their own prejudices and respond to hatred with love instead of more hatred. The hospital where it all happened installed a permanent memorial in the lobby, a plaque dedicated to all healthcare workers who serve with courage and compassion, specifically mentioning Sarah Mitchell, the black nurse and Army veteran whose actions on that Tuesday morning prevented tragedy and sparked transformation. Patients and visitors read that plaque every day, reminded that one person's choice to see humanity in everyone can change the world. 5 years after the incident, Sarah was invited to speak at a national healthcare conference. Thousands of nurses, doctors, and hospital administrators filled the auditorium. The black nurse took the stage and told her story once more, but this time she brought a surprise guest. The man who had been an armed racist walked out on that stage, now a respected anti-violence advocate who had spoken at over 300 schools and counseled hundreds of young people away from hatred. Together, they demonstrated what forgiveness looks like in action. They explained that this wasn't about excusing violence or minimizing the severity of what happened. The black nurse made clear that racism is evil, that bringing a gun into a hospital is inexcusable, and that consequences matter. But the Army veteran also testified that people can change when given the right combination of accountability, support, and grace. The former armed racist agreed completely, accepting full responsibility, while showing that transformation is real when someone genuinely commits to it. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Healthcare workers from across the country lined up afterward to thank Sarah for her example. The black nurse hugged each one, encouraged them to see every patient as a person deserving dignity, and reminded them that their work matters more than they know. The Army veteran had gone from serving her country in combat to serving it in hospitals, to serving it by teaching others how to choose peace over violence. Today, Sarah continues her work as Director of Emergency Response and Crisis Management, now overseeing programs in over 500 hospitals. The black nurse has trained more than 50,000 healthcare workers in techniques that have prevented numerous violent incidents and saved countless lives. The Army veteran speaks regularly about the intersection of military service, healthcare, faith, and reconciliation, always pointing people toward God's power to redeem even the most broken situations. The man who once came to that hospital as an armed racist now works full-time for a non-profit organization dedicated to de-radicalizing extremists and healing communities torn apart by hatred. He credits the black nurse who showed him mercy as the reason he's alive and the reason he found purpose. Their unlikely friendship continues to inspire people around the world who hear their story. What do you think you would have done in Sarah's position? When you face someone filled with hatred, do you respond with more hatred, or do you look for the humanity underneath? Leave your thoughts in the comments because your perspective matters. This black nurse and Army veteran proved that courage isn't just about facing danger. It's about choosing compassion when revenge would be easier. The armed racist who wanted to harm her became her partner in preventing others from going down the same dark path. That's the power of seeing people the way God sees them, as capable of change no matter how far they've fallen. Sarah's story reminds us that our worst moments don't have to define us, and that showing mercy to those who least deserve it can create transformation nobody thought possible. The black nurse used her Army veteran training not to destroy an enemy, but to save a life, and in doing that she saved countless others. The armed racist who walked into that hospital planning murder walked out of prison years later as an advocate for peace. That's what happens when one person decides that love is stronger than hate. Memorial Hospital still talks about that Tuesday morning when everything changed. New staff members hear the story during orientation. The black nurse's example sets the standard for how they treat everyone who walks through their doors, whether as patients, visitors, or even threats. The Army veteran showed them that true strength means controlling yourself in situations that would make others lose control, and that faith in God gives you the ability to see possibilities others miss. The impact of those few minutes in a hospital hallway continues spreading year after year. Every healthcare worker Sarah trains carries her message forward. Every young person who hears the former armed racist speak about his transformation makes different choices because of it. Every hospital that implements her crisis response protocols creates safer environments because one black nurse and Army veteran refused to let hatred win. Think about the people in your life who challenge you, who might even oppose you. What if your response to them could change their entire trajectory? What if showing them dignity instead of hostility opened a door they didn't know existed? Sarah didn't know that treating an armed racist with compassion would lead to all of this, but she made the choice anyway because it aligned with her values and her faith. The results speak for themselves. This black nurse proved that your past experiences, whether in the Army or anywhere else, prepare you for moments you never see coming. This Army veteran demonstrated that training and skill matter, but character matters more. The armed racist learned that it's never too late to change, but change requires genuine accountability and hard work. Together, their story shows that redemption is real and that God can use anyone willing to be used. What's your biggest takeaway from Sarah's story? How does it change the way you think about forgiveness, second chances, or responding to people who wish you harm? Share your thoughts below because these conversations matter. This black nurse and Army veteran didn't just save lives that day in the hospital. She continues saving lives every time someone hears her story and chooses a different path. That's the kind of impact one person can have when they let their faith and training work together for good. The next time you face a difficult person or a dangerous situation, remember Sarah Mitchell. Remember that the black nurse saw a human being where others saw only a threat. Remember that the Army veteran used her strength to de-escalate rather than dominate. Remember that choosing compassion doesn't mean accepting evil. It means believing that transformation is possible through God's grace and human courage. That's the lesson this story teaches, and that's why the ending shocked everyone who witnessed it. Hatred walked into that hospital, but love walked out victorious, and that victory continues changing lives every single day.